The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, we come at you live every single Friday from the Money Radio studios right here in Scottsdale. We're in the Scottsdale Air Park studios of Money Radio. And we're coming at you 1510 a.m., 105.3 FM, and the World Wide Web at moneyradio1510.com. And our show is about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. And how do we do this? We do this by bringing extraordinary guests to the show. And today is no different. I have two very extraordinary guests that are here with me. They're coming to us through technology, thanks to the advent of teleconferencing and certainly the telephone. So I am proud to have back on the show. I had her on last June. I have Terri Spitz. She is the executive director for the Desert Southwest chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Welcome back to the show, Terri.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for inviting us.
It's good to have you. And I also have, along with her from the Desert Southwest chapter, I have Kinsey McManus, and she is the program director. Welcome to the show, Kinsey.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
It's good to have you. And this is a great time of year to bring you both here onto the show, because here we are in March, and the beginning of March, we usually get facts and figures from the Alzheimer's Association. And, you know, I think all of us, we look forward to it, but we hold our breath because we know that this is an awful disease that is really growing. And the numbers are daunting and they are concerning. And for many of our listeners that have been here on the show, I've had the folks from the Banner Alzheimer's Institute here. I've had Barrow Neurological Institute here. I've had doctors. I've had research analysts. I've had a lot of people talk about this specific disease. And, you know, before we jump into the facts and figures, I'm going to ask you, Terri, really to talk to us about the Alzheimer's Association and some of the work that the Desert Southwest chapter does.
Well, thank you, Bob. So the Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia. And we do this by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. So you may know you've done plenty of interviews with some of our great researchers that are right here in Arizona. The Alzheimer's Association is actually the largest nonprofit funder of research, and that's aside from our U.S. government and China. So when you look at just the incredible research dollars that we fund, it's just incredible. And I know that the answer to this disease is really, I have this strong feeling that it could come out of our state. You know, we've got some great researchers here that we fund. So, you know, though we have some really high numbers in our state, we have a lot of hope here too. So aside from, you know, what we do in research, you know, we provide a lot of care and support to those impacted with the disease, and then also those who care for those individuals. So we provide support groups, early stage engagement, community education, and we work really closely with our community partners just to make sure that they know that we're here. We have an 1-800 helpline that's available 24/7. So anyone can call with any type of question, whether you're having trouble navigating through the health system, or if you're experiencing yourself something that you're not sure about and you just want some want some extra, answers, or you want to talk through it with someone. But there's a ton of resources, but I can tell you that just in our state, the Desert Southwest chapter is here for you. And, we've got a ton of resources at our fingertips. So we're often a lifeline to many people.
And, what's interesting is you talked about that the Alzheimer's Association behind the NIH and U.S. government in China is the largest source of funding for a lot of this research. And I feel an obligation to share with our listeners. If you are listening in and you feel compelled and you have been affected by this or know someone that's been affected by this, please go to their website. It's really simple. It's alz.org, and for Desert Southwest chapter, it's /DSW, and right on the top right, you've got a big box that says donate. So I'm making that shameless appeal. That's not coming from you folks, but I really, I appeal to you all that if you're interested in helping with the research, we need donations for sure. So you set the table in really talking about the work that you're doing here, and certainly you're helping out so many families. And when I look at the numbers are just scary. Right here in Arizona, we're looking at about 180,000 people that are living with this disease, and we have nearly 300,000 people, and I'm talking about family members and friends, providing care, and they're not getting remunerated for this. A lot of these folks are giving up their lives to really help their loved ones, and that in and of itself is extraordinary, but it's also very sad too.
Yeah, I think that when you look at that point, and then you also look at Arizona has the fastest growth rate for Alzheimer's. So, we, with the growing retirement community and also baby boomers who are becoming seniors, we're going to see a rise in Alzheimer's disease, in our state. Just looking at our state plan, by 2030, Arizona will have as many older Arizonans age 60 and above as children under 17. So when you just look at that fact, are we ready for it? Right. Are we ready for this? And then you look at the caregivers, the facts and figures report that just came out that you referenced, we are number one in 3 areas, and we really don't want to be. So one is having that fastest growing growth rate. The second one is having that highest average number of hours per week per caregiver in the country. So we're actually 50% more than the national average. We are caregivers, and it could be, we're not sure, why that is, but it could be that we have one caregiver in the home that's taking care of that person. But they're working almost a full-time job, almost about 38, 39 hours a week. And then the third thing that we're number one is Arizona has the highest increase in dementia deaths during COVID this past year in 2020.
Whoa, that's extraordinary. I want to just really pause for a moment because I've shared this here on the show. We live in a community that isn't like it is back in the Midwest or back east where you have that nuclear family that stays together. I mean, a lot of people have come here for better climate, better weather, for business or whatever their reason is. So I can understand why there's such a large amount of hours per caregiver here because there's not really the family members here, correct? I mean, that's probably part of it. And, I really appreciate you sharing the fact that, this is something we don't want to be number one in. And I want to kind of set the table for the national numbers and the national perspective. Alzheimer's, 6th leading cause of death nationally. Every 65 seconds, someone is being diagnosed with this disease. Do you have, as part of the facts and figures, and I want to kind of give a tease for our listeners as we get ready to go into the second segment, what are those numbers here in Arizona?
Kinsey, did you want to take that one? The number of people who have Alzheimer's.
And the leading, is it the fifth leading cause of death in Arizona, or is it the fourth?
It is the fifth leading cause of death in Arizona. And the reality is that currently there are over 150,000 Arizonans living with Alzheimer's and dementia. And we expect that by 2025, so now we're talking in 4 years, 200,000 people will be living with dementia. And again, keep in mind, we do have the fastest growth rate. So we're just really at an epicenter here.
So 200,000 in the next 4 years, but those are the ones that are diagnosed, correct? How many are out? How many are out there that family members are covering, and they're not? People are dealing with deficits, but they're not revealing that they may have dementia or Alzheimer's. That number could be much larger, correct?
Yes, we know only about 50% of people living with the disease are formally diagnosed.
Wow.
So that could be an astronomical number comparatively.
Well, you guys hear the music. James, our extraordinary engineer, loves playing The Who. Got a little Baba O'Reilly. It's not Teenage Wasteland. A lot of people think it's Teenage Wasteland. It's Baba O'Reilly taking us out. I am pleased to have the Alzheimer's Association, the Desert Southwest chapter here. I got Terri Spitz, the executive director, Kinsey McManus, the program director. We're down one segment. We got 3 more to go. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Come back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you're just tuning in, we're in our second segment here. And I am pleased to have with me, joining through technology, I've got Terri Spitz. She's the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association Desert Southwest chapter. And I've also got Kinsey McManus. She is the program director for the Desert Southwest chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And if you missed our first segment, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, drop down to the radio show, third button down, and you can catch the first segment. You can catch about 400 others we've been bringing to you for the last 8 years. So in that first segment, we talked about the Alzheimer's Association and its purpose and what they do here in our community. They do amazing work for so many families. We also got a chance to do a little dive, not a deep dive, but a little dive into the facts and figures that just came out at the beginning of March, and really talked about how we're number one in things that we don't want to be number one in. And I implore you to go ahead and listen to those, or that segment, if you haven't heard it. But I want to talk a little bit more about what came out of the special report, some of the findings through a nationwide survey of the different ethnicities that were conducted. I don't know who would like to talk about it, but certainly there's a lot of revealing stuff that came out. Kinsey, you want to take it?
Sure, I'm happy to take it. This was really the first time ever that the association examined racial and ethnic attitudes and experiences in regards specifically to Alzheimer's and dementia care. There's certainly been a lot of research around healthcare generally, but this was the first time that we did 2 national studies to really get at the heart of what was going on. So the first thing we know overarching is that discrimination based on race and ethnicity is a major barrier to accessing dementia care. Based on the studies, we learned that half of Black Americans report that they've experienced healthcare discrimination in the process of accessing dementia and Alzheimer's healthcare. More than 2 in 5 Native Americans, 42%, and 1/3 of Asian Americans and 1/3 of Hispanic Americans likewise report having experienced discrimination when seeking health care. Now, we know that this is particularly disconcerting because it's already very challenging to get access to effective dementia care more broadly across the country. We know that of people living with dementia, and I touched on this just at the end of our last segment, only half of people living with dementia get diagnosed, and only half of them are actually told that they have that diagnosis. So we are talking about a very extreme situation where, for those who even know that Alzheimer's or dementia may be a part of their health situation, if you are a part of a community of color, you are really struggling to get the care that you need. And one of the major kind of concerns that was expressed around this is that healthcare providers are just not listening to the reports that Black Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans are actually sharing with their providers. And we know how important the reports of changes in behaviors and cognitive capacity can be to ensuring the proper diagnosis, the correct diagnosis, and then the proper course of care.
And
I do have some. Oh, I don't want to.
No. Go ahead.
There, Bob.
You keep on going.
You know, there is some good news to all of this, which is that we know that providers don't necessarily need to be of the race or ethnicity of the person receiving care. It's not about that. It's really about ensuring that our healthcare systems have the tools they need to be more culturally relevant and competent. And it can be simple things as making sure that signs are translated. So if you have a sign in English and you serve a large percent of the population who's Spanish speaking, having that same sign right below it in Spanish is one easy way to ensure that we're reducing barriers to care. On a more deeper level, it's thinking about this pipeline of providers. So how do we ensure that we're giving greater access to diverse communities to become healthcare professionals? As a part of the training process for all healthcare professionals, are we providing them training on things like unconscious bias, understanding the different communities you will be serving, making sure that there's ongoing training with staff? A big piece of something that we all need to work together on is rebuilding trust with these communities. Because this has been a consistent issue, you know, now more than ever as providers, we need to partner with each other to better serve our communities.
I love the hope that you're sharing with us. Obviously, we know where the challenges are. And I'm going to maybe get into it more in the third segment, talking about COVID and how it's impacted it. But I do believe, and you guys just came off last week doing a legislative effort, it really is important for us to get the lawmakers involved, right? I mean, is that not the first step? I mean, we need to make sure that our U.S. representatives and senators, as well as our state representatives and senators, are behind us. You want to talk a little bit about that? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think our biggest and really quickest changes and chances to improve some of these numbers and to move at a faster rate is really through policy. We advocated for funding for a survey that would collect some data to allow us to do what we need to do a little bit better, and to get some data from people all over the state to really see what they're dealing with. And some of these things, just things like having a dementia capable workforce and putting some things in place where we have the tools to be set up. When we talk about how many this retirement community growing so fast and baby boomers becoming seniors, we can do so much as an association. We can care, we can offer our care and support, our helpline support groups, but we're going to get to a part where it's going to be too much. And so, working with our policymakers, and, we have volunteer advocates and ambassadors all over the state, which do such a great job working in partnership with us to really, tell that story, to advocate, to share their own personal story of what they've been dealing with, because that's going to be the quickest, the quickest way. And we've seen that just through, our research funding and being able to really build that out more. So
that is one way to accomplish it. And I love the fact that you had this legislative week last week and really getting out in front of the lawmakers. But one of the other things, as we get ready to take our halftime break, is the dementia-friendly communities. I would imagine that that's really helped. I mean, it started with Tempe, and we're trying to make more dementia-friendly communities throughout the state.
Yeah, I definitely think, the more communities that become dementia-friendly is a wonderful thing, because it really shines a light on a little bit on what we're dealing with, and these communities are kind of standing up and taking notice that we need to support this area of our community, and we take it seriously. We also need to kind of move to dementia capable, and and build some other areas. Educating our first responders, that's another piece. So there's still a lot of work to do, but having these dementia-friendly cities starting to pop up around our state are definitely a positive thing, and a lot of great work in the right direction.
Well, I know that you recently joined the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging, and I stepped down from that, and that's been a big initiative of theirs. Listen, we're at halftime right now. Halftime at Health Futures. I got the Alzheimer's Association Desert Southwest chapter around. Stick around. We got one more half to go. We'll be right back.
Being in control of your money provides freedom. Learn how to make it, spend it, and invest it. We're Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and if you're just tuning in, we're in the second half here, and I'm very pleased to have joining me through technology. I've got Terri Spitz. She's the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association Desert Southwest Chapter. And I also have Kinsey McManus, and she is the Program Director for the Desert Southwest Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. If you missed our first half, you can catch it right up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, third button down is radio show, and you can catch the first half as well as many more that we've been bringing to you for the last 8 years. So we covered a lot in the first half. We talked about the Alzheimer's Association and really the great work that they're doing. They just released the facts and figures for the prevalence, if you would, of Alzheimer's and dementia in our communities. That was just done at the beginning of March. We talked a lot about that. We also talked about some stuff that is relating to the state and some of the work that is being done here in the state, and we dived deeper into the data. But when we left off in the second segment, we were talking about dementia communities, and how we also were talking about people of color and the challenges that we were having with identifying and having access to care for those people of color. And we also left off, and I want to pick up on it and have you take the ball on this one, Terri. And that is, we talked about the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging, and I was on the council for about 4 years, and our number one priority was always Alzheimer's. And I really want you to share with our listeners, because they were really the impetus to really put forth the state plan for Alzheimer's. And now that I'm no longer on, I was hoping you could give us a window in terms of what the governor's office is doing.
Well, first, thank you for serving in those 4 years and kind of building a great foundation. I just recently, started with the Governor's Advisory Council, so we've only had a few meetings, and we've we've now pulled together what will be the Alzheimer's work group. So, with the goal of making sure that, all of our seniors and the quality of life and everything is the best it can be, really taking a look at the state plan again and what we need to prioritize, what we need to, take some really positive steps on and just, move things along. And so we've had a few meetings. The first few were really getting a look at the state from the lens of each different agency. So we've heard a lot of different presentations, and we've really gotten a good look at how everyone has fared through COVID. So I can tell you just the Alzheimer's Association, it might be today that we've hit our year mark of being remote, where we had to leave our offices. And I know that, across the state, it's been kind of the same story, but we quickly turned our support groups, which were so popular about being in person, and you have that camaraderie of people that are supporting each other, converting those to online or through the telephone. On the good side, when you do something virtually, you actually extend your reach a little bit, and you can, if you can't get to a support group, you can call in, but it gets, it starts to lose its luster after a while. So it's been a great conversation to really see how, different organizations across the state that are in the same space are handling virtual delivery and what they're looking at. And some have lost funding. They've had to do layoffs. And really what that looks like for the community we serve and how that's affecting. So one of the things that I can say about the Governor's Advisory Council is the push to let's take a look at the problem, but let's see how we can collaborate too. And let's really, we're going to say these are going to be our priorities, but how are we going to move on them? And what are those steps that we're going to take so we can see some movement? So I'm really encouraged by the group. I'm encouraged about, really making some big, bold moves and doing some, just really pushing that service more out just through collaboration and partnership.
Love that. And really talking about the great state of Arizona. I mean, not only do we have the governor's attention on this, but we have these phenomenal institutions. I mean, I talked briefly about it. I had the privilege of serving on the board of directors for the Banner Alzheimer's Institute for 10 years. And, it's one of the incredible research institutes in the world, and it's right here in our backyard. We also have the Barrow Neurological Institute, BNI, and I had the pleasure of having Dr. Anna Burke here in the studio with me. And by the way, on the Banner side, at the end of the month, I have Dr. Eric Ryman that's going to be here on the studio. So, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. These folks are world leaders, and they're right here in our backyard. We've also got the Sun Health Banner Research Institute. We've got Mayo Clinic. We've got so many others. I know I'm missing names. Honor Health. Everyone else they're all collaborating together. And the nice thing about it is no one's siloed. Everyone's open source.
No.
And it really is the moonshot, right? I mean, you shared it, I think, Kinsey. You said that we were going to be looking at over 200,000 people here in our state in 4 years. We've got to do something. And Terri, you gave us numbers saying that we were going to have more people that are 60 and older by 2030 than we are going to have 17 and younger. And our state is leading in that too. So we've got to figure out how we can find a way, if it's not a cure, at least to be able to stave off this awful disease before, as Dr. Ryman says, before we lose another generation.
Yeah. I mean, I think the wonderful thing about our state, even though we're number one, there is so much hope here, and it behooves us to work collaboratively in partnership. If the answer if the cure for Alzheimer's comes out of a research facility that we haven't funded, we are at the top of the heap excited for that. I mean, this is what we all want.
Right.
We are all working together for this. And the Arizona Research Consortium, talk about some incredibly amazing researchers. Having, I've met Dr. Burke. I mean, I've met Dr. Ryman several times, and he's going to be speaking at our gala, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But just such incredible minds, and there's just so much hope, and there's so many answers that come out of our own state, and it's wonderful for us to work in partnership because we know what they're doing. They're driving this research, but then we can also be on that side where we can offer people help while we're getting to that answer, and we can hold their hand and be that lifeline to them. So it makes so much more sense to work in partnership, and I love to see all of the research institutions kind of coming together. And I know that was, that's been something that's happened a while, but it's wonderful to see.
It is.
And be a part of.
The show goes really fast, and we got about a minute here in our third segment, and then we get to the fourth segment. But I want to start the third segment talking about COVID. And you said this, Terri, before about the support groups. It does give us more access to more people that we're able to do support groups virtually. It isn't the same as being in the room with others, but I think so many people that are dealing with this disease, all those family caregivers that we were talking about, the 300,000 plus of those just here in the Desert Southwest chapter region, they all feel like they're alone, right? They feel like they're the only one that is experiencing this. And these support groups really help them to understand they're not alone. And they also learn that there are other ways, or should I say, there are ways of dealing with the challenges that they're faced with.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wind down this third segment, and again, great tunes from James, I want to talk about in the fourth segment, I want to talk about COVID. I think you guys have some data you'd like to share with us. And again, it's kind of like number one, it's not good information, but we want people to know some of the facts and figures and the things we've learned about COVID. And then more importantly, I want to talk about this gala that we've got coming up and really want to elicit support from our community to support this gala. Little Marshall Tucker Band taking us out. We're down 3 segments. We got one more to go. I've got the Desert Southwest chapter of the Alzheimer's Association here in the studio virtually. I've got Terri Spitz, the executive director, and I've got Kinsey McManus. She is the program director. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. And I am your host, Bob Roth, and I am pleased to have in the studio, I've got, coming virtually, I've got Terri Spitz. She's the executive director, and I have got Kinsey McManus, and she is the program director. So if you missed the first 3 segments, you can catch them on our website at cypresshomecare.com, and you could go to the media button, hit the drop down, third button down is radio show, and you can catch the first 3 segments, and you can catch this segment as well. So what I want to do on this segment right here, this is our final segment, I want to talk about COVID and its effects on this awful disease. And I think it's you, Kinsey. Would you like to tell us a little bit about COVID and some of the data that you've been able to discover? Thank you.
Yeah. So, I want to touch back on something you had mentioned in the last segment, Bob, that Alzheimer's disease is such an isolating disease. And we were talking about the access to our telephone support groups. I will say over this last year, we have heard such heartbreaking and incredible stories from our caregivers. Many have seen their loved ones rapidly decline with the disease over this last year during COVID. And further, we have a much harder kind of statistic to think about, which is, we lost 1,532 more people to dementia this year in Arizona than anticipated. So we generally do kind of an average of the last 5 years to look at what's expected. And certainly we know that this really is driven by COVID, both directly and indirectly. So one thing we think is that early on, there may have been people living with dementia who had contracted COVID and died, but because we weren't as aware of how widespread COVID was in the beginning of last year, that they may have been coded as dementia deaths, but were in fact COVID deaths. And especially horrifying time watching COVID just go wildfire through our nursing homes and long-term care facilities. I mean, just unbelievable. But we also know that as a part of the COVID restrictions, it made certain things much more challenging to do. So while we have seen a great, success with telemedicine, particularly in the beginning, it was very difficult to access regular care. And people living with dementia do tend to have other co-occurring diseases that certainly require quite a bit of ongoing healthcare provisions. So if you're living with diabetes, heart disease, so the people living with dementia didn't necessarily have the same access to their doctors that they would have, which complicates life. And the other piece that we think really had a big driver of this is around social isolation. Where initially you would maybe have a community surrounding a person living with dementia and their direct caregiver. Suddenly our caregivers became the only people connecting. So we've heard from families about their loved one is rapidly forgetting other family members, even with some memory tools. Caregivers being in much more difficult, stressful situations because there was, particularly with adult day centers closing, lack of access to respite services, our caregivers were really facing a crisis point of being completely unable to leave their loved one to do grocery shopping and different things. And so we really looked at this dramatic, small, shrinking circle of a population who already feels isolated more generally. So even once we get to the other side of this, I think there'll still be some longer term ramifications over the next several years as a result of this. Certainly, one of the major concerns we have is also about caregiver health. Our caregivers, they have done some research to say that caregiving for a loved one with Alzheimer's and dementia can have the most negative health impacts than any other chronic disease. So we're really concerned about the longer term implications of what this means.
I could take a whole show and talk about what we're talking about right now, Kinsey. And, last week I had Bill Dombey, who is the president and CEO of the National Association of Home Care and Hospice, on the show. And one of the things that we were talking about was homebound seniors, but we were also talking about homebound seniors with those family caregivers and vaccinations.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any work that's been done with the Alzheimer's Association in particular to try to get those family caregivers vaccinated, because certainly those loved ones are at home and the family caregiver is the one that's going out to the grocery store, going out to the pharmacy, going out amongst public. If you want to take a minute or two and talk about that.
Yeah, I think as the association, we really believe that the vaccine is the answer we're looking for to make a major change in the tide with COVID. Mm-hmm. So we are strongly advocating for caregivers and people living with the disease to get vaccinated. We're also trying to share resources as they come out in our local communities, particularly around transportation, to getting vaccines and really staying up to date in what's happening in vaccinations across the country so that we're helping our local communities really get connected.
So we have about a minute left, and I really want to talk about this great event that's coming up on April 30th, Friday, from 6:30 to 7:15. Tell our listeners about it and tell them how they can participate and get involved.
Well, we will be holding our Love Not Forgotten virtual gala. So while we'd love to meet in person, we're going to do this event virtually. It's going to be filled with just some amazing, amazing speakers, amazing stories, music. We have Shannon Wallace, who has been a jazz singer for about 25 plus years. She's going to be doing a performance.
She's amazing. I've met her before. Awesome.
Well, and you mentioned, we've been talking a little bit about research. We have Dr. Eric Ryman. We have Dr. Marwan Sabah from the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Roberta Brenton from the U of A coming. But most of all, we have an amazing, two amazing women that are honorees that we will be really paying tribute to, and really getting a look at that disease and giving everyone an opportunity to support. So the website address is dswgala.givesmart.com.
One more time.
dswgala.givesmart, and that's GIVESMART.com. We'd love for you to come.
That's Friday, April 30th, 6:30 to 7:15. Terri, Kinsey, you guys are amazing. It's always great to see you, Terri. And Kinsey, great to have you join me today on Health Futures. We're going to definitely have you back for the longest day of the year in June, and I'd like to definitely have you back in November or just prior to promote the walks. If anyone wants to donate to the Alzheimer's Association, how do we do that, Terri? You go to dswgala.givesmart.com if you want the gala, or if you want to just make a donation, just alz.org/DSW, and there's a donate button. Thank you, ladies. You make it a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next Friday.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress Home Care Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3